All right, and we are live to the Explore Simplexity podcast. We have a special guest here today, old friend of mine.
Somewhat special.
Joe Peck. Yeah, so you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, my name is Joseph Peck. I have known the Lovelaces since I was 3. I say they're one of the few people that I've known longer than my little brother. I consider myself a jack of all trades, master of something someday. And then there's another phrase that I like to use, which is good to keep yourself humble, but also to sort of like not feel too down when you do something dumb. And it is, if you do like something awesome, like you are not awesome, I would say I'm not awesome. I just do awesome things from time to time. Or if it's stupid, I will say I'm not stupid. I just do stupid things from time to time. So
that's a healthy outlook. I mean, that has something you've developed recently?
It was coincidentally during a programming boot camp is when I first was using that. It was either it was very early in it, or it might have been a little before. But so that puts us at almost 2 years ago. Exactly, perhaps. It could have been to this very day 3 years ago, because it's 2024. It could have been 3 years to the day that I came up with this.
Wow, okay, so it's pretty recent. Not since you're
3 years.
3 year old, right?
Yeah. More recent, yeah. So I love the hard sciences. I was once at a birthday party, and we all just sort of got distracted talking about different hard sciences. So I was a math major at the time, and I was geeking out with a computer science major. There was a physics major, and then the other one was a chemistry major. And so we're all just talking about what our different fields are at this birthday party while other people are.
Well, it's very like hard science, quantitative.
Very hard science and quantitative. Yeah, I like things that make sense, that there's like a solid truth behind it, where sometimes you know the answer. Like a lot of math is proven already, and you can prove that like this is what it is, and I like that. And obviously something like math, you can keep going. There's always questions that you don't know, but there are answers that are there. There's a truth behind it, and that's true of physics as well. And like you can calculate, if we have a piece of ice on a table and we were to flick it, how far is it going to go? And the more you know, the more accurate you can get. And so you're going to have the coefficient of friction as you like hit it. And, if it doesn't behave the way that you were expecting it to, there could be a rule that you don't know yet, or it could be a rule that humanity doesn't understand. And right, that's why a lot of the way that light has contributed a lot to that with society, of like the way that waves of light or the way that the light will like go through holes will just lead to unexpected results. And scientists are like
quantum physics stuff.
Yeah, like
double slit.
Quantum physics, the double slit, the way that like light has behaviors of waves and particles, and you're just like, what? And so they shine light through these holes, and scientists have this school of thought: is it going to do this or is it going to do that? Yeah. And it's neither of them get a perfect answer. It's like, what?
It's just like what, like WAT.
Yeah, just the good. Doctor Who of the old days, just like, what? What?
I don't know if you might have been there, but we had this party at my old apartment, and a bunch of people, and Johnny and I were talking about like dark matter and like gravity wells, and this guy walks in, butts in the conversation, says, "Whoa, are you guys stoned?" Like, no, this is a typical conversation.
Yeah, I don't know if I was there for that one, but
80% of the universe is unexplained.
Yeah,
and all these like weird quantum things.
Yeah, so I think that is one of the things, and that is shown through in most my like philosophical endeavors. I think it shapes a lot of the way that things can be approached. And like I'm by trade for, like I mentioned, the programming bootcamp, and I've held to that for the past 3 years now. And so I actually am a software engineer. I love the way that almost whatever the mind can think of, you can program in one way or another. And especially now that VR is getting into the mix, and you can enhance it a little further, and then they have augmented reality, or you're just browsing a website. Like whatever the human mind can think of is very artsy and fluid and whatever, but the way that you're implementing that is a very rigid coding structure, and the computer will go through that same code the same way every time. And that is one of the hard sciences that is just beautiful, the way that that follows that structure. And that's the same is true with like mathematics too, like the way that you could like prove a theorem and it comes together. And when you are in school, you turn in your answer, and if it matches, then you get points. And if you don't, then some teachers will give you grace points, but you have a right and a wrong answer. Whereas in an English class, you can have that you did not properly address the thesis
It didn't
provided
feel
to you.
correct to me that you
Yes.
get a point off.
Yes. So
It's like that certainty aspect of there's no funny business, no fuzzy
Yep.
stuff going on.
No ambiguity.
no
Yeah.
ambiguity.
So we had interviewed also Dave how do you say it?
Scotese.
Scotese, and he was also a programmer. And what he
Nice.
likes about it is it's never the program's fault, or it's never
Yes.
right. It's like this stupid thing. It's not doing what I want it to do. He said
Yeah.
it's always the programmer,
Yes. Yeah.
100% of the time.
Yeah.
So you have complete control over what's happening.
That is also one of the beauty parts. One of the favorite meme-ish sort of sound bites that I've heard for programming is programming is the murder mystery where you are both the detective, the killer, and the victim. Because you're looking through this code, you're troubleshooting it. You're the victim because you're at fault, and you're the detective because you're trying to find what happened, and you're also the killer because you might have caused that bug in the first place. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of truth to that, and the smaller the project is, the more true that is, because the
Yeah.
more likely you are to have actually been the one that caused the problem.
Right.
Or I guess not the smaller the project, but the fewer people are on the project. That would make a little more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I do a little bit of programming for my job, nothing like you do, but just just analyzing some data. And when I run into an issue that I figure out how to fix it, you kind of add to your tool belt when you have it next time, or figure
Yeah.
out, oh, that was a stupid way to even begin this chunk
Yeah.
of code, and I'm gonna next time do it a different way.
Well, I think that's one of the beauties of the industry. There's a lot of endeavors like that where your experience gets built upon like it's a puzzle that you can solve, and you have that solution, and you can approach it differently. And I love the industry, like to the point where for my first job out of the programming boot camp, I was doing full-time 8 hours programming for their company. And then I wouldn't have had my fill yet. And so I had my own side projects I would work on. And so I would just transition to spend a good portion of the evening just programming my own things. And people would, when I mention that like something encourages me to not do that, that maybe I don't want to like program back to back, they're like, it sounds kind of normal. Not everybody wants to program for like 10 hours a day. You're okay to not need to program in your free time every day as well.
Yeah, a little
Um,
bit of a relief.
yeah, but I enjoy it. One of the things I was thinking about leading up to accepting this invite was how, perhaps to a certain degree, philosophically, I am an antagonistic guest into the endeavor of exploring Simplexity. Because I believe that there is a lot of merit to being able to explain complex things simply, but I believe that the accuracy of some concepts, maybe it should not be simplified further, because if you continue to simplify it, the accuracy is lost.
You lose nuance.
You can lose nuance, you can lose meaning, and I think that there's a little truth to that too. So,
no, that's a good point. I think simplifying things is more practical and useful, but the things that you kind of are glossing over, like the nuance and the detail,
yeah,
could have some unknown importance in some and in how you're thinking about things. That later on it comes up and it's like, oh, actually, that detail is
yes,
pretty important.
yeah. So I think that there is, there's definitely a place for both. So if you have a complicated topic that you just can't understand, sometimes it is better to put it simpler. And then there are some things where you kind of need to make that distinction. So like in software development, a lot of times there's different ways to store information. And if someone is getting started and they're using these words that are interchangeable, but they're not truly, like an array and an object, they behave differently. And if you get them confused and use the same words, then you can have misconceptions, you can go about the wrong way. And it's also a very precise endeavor. And you have the entire program just not work how you want it to. So that is an example of why you would want to keep things technically complicated and distinct between them.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying, and I do agree. But you can also get lost in the minutia. And
Yes.
there could be so many unimportant details,
Yes.
and it's like, do I really need to pay attention to this detail, even though it's more accurate?
Yep.
So there is a balance, and I'm not sure where the simple and complex merge somewhere,
Yeah.
but
I would.
it's on the spectrum.
Yes. I think it also depends very much on what you're talking about. I just thought it was an interesting contrast between a big chunk of my personality, I would say, and the name of the podcast, where
I gotcha.
I am willing to simplify things, but usually when I do that, it's also often done through an analogy,
Yeah.
or
Right. Something more playful.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, I've known you for so many years now, and I've seen it when something is off or isn't quite right.
oh yeah,
It will just be like
It irks.
a thorn in your mind.
Yeah.
To quote the Matrix.
yeah,
Splinter. Is that what Morpheus said?
yes, a splinter in your mind.
And
Sometimes I can't help myself.
yeah, and it's just like that thing has to not be there.
I was at work sharing an office with a particular person who was talking about her weekend, and she was talking about this great no-limit poker hand that she was playing, and with her and her family. And I was not part of the conversation, even though I was seated like 4 feet away. But she just talks about how someone raised like 10, someone bet 10, then someone raised 20, someone called it, and then another person raised 50, and then someone called it, and then someone raised 200, and went all around the table, and then at the very end, and then someone raised 10, and I heard that, and I'm just like,
Why raise 10?
like, that's against the rules. You literally can't raise 10. Like, you always have to bet or raise at least what the minimum is, unless you're going all in. And I like couldn't help myself. And I just said, you can't do that. And she sort of snapped. Like,
Yeah. There's the social aspect you gotta be careful about.
yeah, so okay, I'm not going to their house anytime soon for poker nights. And poker is another topic which is great because it's very technical and it's also mixed with the psychological. So you do have like an art and a math behind it, because that hybrid is beautiful. I'm very busty on it. I haven't played it in a while, but I took it very seriously for quite a few years. And it has the precision behind it. I don't have a straight. I see cards where I almost have a straight. Like, at what point does it become smart to chase the straight? And there's like a rigid math behind it. Like, well,
Expected value.
yes. So if I'm risking $50 to win $50, and I'm only going to get my straight like 1/4 of the time, it's like, okay, this is kind of burning money. But it's like, if I'm betting $50 to win $1 million, it's like, okay, even if I only get it a quarter of the time, I'm gonna risk my $50. And so those are extreme cases, but there's the art and the science behind it. And then there's, of course, when there's you're playing against other people now at this point, and so there's the psychology of reading the other people, and then that is now impacting the math behind what you're calculating. So they're betting into you, and so you're trying to gauge what the relative strength of the hands is, right? And so now it's like, okay, this person hasn't done anything the entire night, and now he's being aggressive, so he probably has something. And so you can adjust your math based on the psychology of who you're playing against. But if they're betting all the time and they're just reckless, and this is what they've been doing for 90% of their hands, then it's like, okay, the math behind them having a good hand is not very hot right now. And so what do I have? Like, is this going to be good to go up against random cards?
There's still a degree of fuzziness in there, even because you're relying on your own like intuition and judgment about someone, which is interesting because you were saying how much you're drawn to like certainty and precision.
Yes.
But there's this element of chance. But the fact that's cool, which I think you're saying, is you can quantify the chance and then be more precise.
And one of the things that has stuck with me since, like, I got part of the tail end of the golden age of poker in like the 2000s, but another part of it has stuck with me still is the idea of seeing things in the term of ranges and percentages. And that is still something, even though I haven't played poker seriously in, well, if you knew me in the 2000s, it'd be a surprisingly long amount of time. But even though I haven't played in seriously in many years, the inclination to view things in terms of ranges and percentages is a thing. And so when you are gauging people's hands, it's actually a mistake to put them on just one hand, right? And you remember this from back in your own poker days and the craze of the time.
I think, Josh, you got more involved in that than I did.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I can say that I was very close to actually being professional at one point. And so we have another certain friend who I believe has been on the podcast. I'll let you guys mention if you want. But he's very professional. At least he was last time I checked. But
he's still playing.
He was very professional. Yeah, he is like locked in. And I was at the point where I was not employed at the time, unfortunately. And I was just looking at the income of how much money am I making playing poker, and then how much do I have in my bank account. And the income at the time had like approached the point where it's like I could live off of this. But the money size, the capital I had to work with, it's like if I had a bad streak, which is possible, it's like I didn't have enough capital to rely on it.
What do they call that? A poker term for
bankroll?
Yeah, your bankroll.
Yeah, my bankroll was not sufficient, and so that was a very sad day, sometime in 2010.
So to like grow the bankroll, starting out that small would take a very long time, like playing like 50-cent games or something.
Which is how I started. I started playing with quarters, like nickels and dimes, and I moved up to quarters and quarters and various denominations of quarters, and then I moved up to dollars, and at the end I was playing $3-6 online, which is at the start of where you can make enough money to keep yourself afloat in 2010 before everything goes to crap. And then, because the economy is undeniably in a worse place right now than it was then, but if you think about 3-6 limit hold'em, what that means is that like every increment of bet is either $3 or $6. And so if you're playing 4 tables at a time for several hours a day, and each of those bets is $6, that can add up pretty fast. So I had days where, I mean, that was actually when we were roommates, that just for the record.
Yeah.
So while we were roommates, I'm at the height of my poker ship.
Right.
And I was literally had sessions where I would play like for a few hours and I'm like, oh, that was $200.
Right.
I made $200, just $3-6
Yeah.
limit
Can go the
hold'em.
other way too pretty quick.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, I don't have the capital.
Yeah.
Because
So is there like a rule of thumb of how much you should have based on
yes, there is. For limit hold'em, it depends on how serious, like how stiff the competition is. So 300 big bets is if you're playing casual and you want to, if you want, yeah. So the goal behind this is that you want to put money into it and you want it to last forever, right? So you want enough money so you can handle the risk. And so for no limit hold'em, as you know, but not everyone interested in the podcast would, is you have your forced bets, and those are the small bets and the big bets. And so
You mean limit hold'em?
for limit hold'em,
Yeah.
well, Texas hold'em. So they both have the small and the big bets,
Right.
but the limit determines how
Your max bet is,
What
or
your-
even
what
the
your max bet
structure, right? You can't like by the turn in the river, which are the last two cards.
yes.
Increases.
Yes.
Right.
So in limit hold'em on the final two turns, those are where when it becomes the big bets, and so
Right.
the 3-6. So when 3-6 means that the first two rounds are starting out with $3 is the increments everybody's doing, and then the $6 notation means that everybody's betting increments of $6.
Right.
So, and at the time, like minimum wage is sometimes $7.
Yeah.
So if you think about it that way, if you raise and say I raise, they bet $6, you say I raise, and you've instantly put like 3 hours of minimum wage. Or if you don't want to be too simple, that would be like 2.5 hours, right?
Yeah. No, that's a really
So-
interesting way to think about it. It's like you're literally throwing time and effort on the table.
Yes. So if you're playing casually and you don't want to lose, and you want enough money that you can always recover from bad luck, because that's the whole name of poker is you're battling bad luck. You are making it so that when you have good luck, you are making as much as you can, and when you have bad luck, you're losing as little as possible. That's really the name of all forms of poker.
And the poker terminology, I like to refresh. So I know you can run hot.
Yeah, they have streaks. They have running hot. Those are the two.
What's if you're just doing really bad?
They call them slumps.
Slumps.
Slumps, I believe, is what they do. Slumps and ruts.
Yeah.
And then on another, well, I'm not going to digress, but so the idea is that if you know what you're doing and you have some bad luck, the idea is that mathematically, probabilistically, your bad luck will run out and you'll be able to hit enough good luck again to recover your bankroll, right? So this is why they have like a set number. So the idea, looping back, is that if you're kind of casual against people also taking it casual, then 300 big bets is what your minimum should be. And if you are playing competitively where people are being harsher, then the general rule of thumb is well, it was at the time, it was 500 big bets.
500.
So just to have some extra cushion, because there's a big difference between people who are sitting down to have fun and people who are sitting down with the intent to also take your money. So there's
The sharks.
Yes, and there's
Gotta use the poker terminology.
yes, the sharks, or the maniacs too, which just literally bet on everything, and it takes a lot of experience, and just it can be very difficult to get there too.
I think I'm remembering.
The people who are maniacs that just bet every time.
Yeah, I think I'm now remembering an issue when we were roommates and you were playing. You were like on the border of going from, was it 2-4 to 3-6?
Yeah, that's
And
very tough. Yeah.
So it's like, okay, I have enough big bets now to do 3-6, but if that goes poorly, you're like
Yep.
shot down, and then you kind of go back up and you reach the threshold and you push back down.
Yep. I did
And
that for a bit.
It's like, yeah, I think you were pretty frustrated.
Yeah. That was frustrating to see that. And so part of it is getting used to the idea that you have bad luck, and then a lot of it is introspective of figuring out why I lost, and then like why did you have a bad night, and then correcting that, or having the confidence to say that you did it right and you had bad luck, right? So are you going with which of those is it? And sometimes it's a combination, right? Like you played bad and you had bad luck.
And if you're playing bad and that continues to make you play worse, and then it goes, what's that called? That
is called tilt.
Going on tilt.
Tilt is bad, and so a big part of it, if you ever want to play poker seriously, and you don't want to dump more money in later, you want to like keep this capital rolling, the bankroll. You need to know when to stop, and so if you're mad and angry, then you need to stop, and if you're tired, then you need to stop, and those are both some of the biggest downfalls for regular play. And during these times where I'd hit the barrier, I'd have days where I would think about what I did, and I would say, no, I did that right. I had bad luck. I'm gonna move down to the 2-4. I'm gonna build up my bankroll back up, and I'm gonna try to hit 3-6 again. And sometimes it's like, okay, well, did you notice it's 1 a.m.? Maybe you should. I know you're nocturnal, but you're really not thinking clearly enough to be playing against other people that want to take your money. And then there's a lot of like humility behind it. One of the sad things about poker is that ideally there's a lot of merit to hunting the fish. And so like if you're going into a tournament to say that you won a tournament or you have friends, then pitting yourself against the best of the best and seeing how good you can do, that's a thing. But if you're trying to be professional and like, I'm going to make a living off of this, then you need to be able to identify that the person you're sitting down with is better, and you don't need to beat them. Like if you think, that's one of the things that you should do is like, as you sit down and you're looking at the table,
that's one thing I never
figure out the person. And if you realize you cannot figure them out, like maybe you should go somewhere else.
Yeah. That's one thing that never set quite right with me, was basically to be the most profitable, you have to hunt down the people who don't know what they're doing.
That is, there's a bit of truth to that. And then there's also just keeping them at ease. And so to that, I would say it is still an endeavor where those people have chosen to set it down at the table.
Very true.
That's you are not like walking up and like finding crippled people and starting fights, right? Like they sat down at your table, like the boxing analogy, right? So they got in the ring, and then you got in the ring. You're not.
That's very true.
You're not dragging random people and throwing them in the octagon. And we're gonna do this very much against your will. Dukes up. And so, so I had these frustrating nights, and one of the things I just said, like, if I didn't have these nights, I could totally go professional. And I said that enough. I had enough of these frustrating nights where I said that to myself, that I was like, you know what, that's true. What if you were to? What if you were to figure out how to not have these nights anymore? And the sad thing is that I found the answer to that question. So when I eventually declared that I had to stop, it's just because my bank account, like, if I were to lose this, I like literally broke. And so I don't have the capital, I don't have the bankroll to keep playing. But I left winning at 3-6. And so that's like a fairly cool, and then also sort of a bummer. And so I wouldn't have been able to like have a super lavish lifestyle with that, but I would have been able to pay the bills with the life that we had at the time. So
yeah, and that's super crazy thinking, playing a game, doing what you like with precision and math, and then also making a living.
That is
like, that's a pretty decent combination of things to be involved in.
Yeah. And then going back to the jack of all trades of other interests.
Well, before you move on, I had a few more questions about like poker And then like, so you used to play online a lot,
I used to play online the vast majority of the time.
right?
Yeah.
And I think most games are still online.
I believe that most of the ways to make money have been moved to on offline, so you have to play at brick and mortar.
Okay.
So, speaking of games, a lot of the way that the government works, they're like rules to that game,
Mm-hmm.
and there are a few of those things which I think are undeniably the rules should be rewritten if you could like start the country over again, right? Not to get too crazy, but one of the things is that you can attach multiple concepts within the same bill, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And so what they'll do, and I'm not going to say any sides, but it's like we have this agenda that we want to get done. We have this concept that we want to get done, and then they will group inside of their like.
Piggyback.
And we're going to save all of the puppies,
Right.
right? And so then they will push those together. And so it's like, no, this is a terrible idea. We're not going to do it. And then the side will say, but don't you want to save the puppies?
Yeah.
They voted against saving all of the puppies. They hate puppies. And so something similar had happened to that. Slight digression. Something similar happened to that where things were put forward that people wanted, and then they just tacked on this other bill. So it's like, we have this mission critical thing over here that everyone's going to vote yes on. And we just tacked on this little rule that, oh, by the way, you can't play poker online anymore. And just,
right.
And that's part of what it was. And so,
well, the reason I brought that up wasn't necessarily for like, the law or whatever, but I was just thinking with the advent of all this AI technology.
yes.
I'm imagining that the AI could probably figure out a strategy that's pretty freaking good compared to someone even of your stature at playing poker.
I would say that is definitely technically possible. A lot of what they have done, they had a lot of programs back in my day because they were online. And so they had
bots.
Not bots, but stat tracking, and stat tracking is what a lot of machine learning is built on. And it can track the history of each opponent, and it could see what they played. And so it was really good at giving general stats, and it was good at showing your own specific history. And so the longer you played with another person, the more accurate it could get. So if we were playing, and let's just say we had a full table with like 5 other people playing 8-handed, you would have an overlay on the screen, and so it could be tracking the histories, and it doesn't necessarily know. It would only know what they're showing. It only knows what was revealed to you. So if Josh were to bet, let's say 10 hands, and everyone folds, then he would get a stat for he's being very aggressive, but the bot doesn't know what Josh had. Now, if someone were to stand up to him, he does it for the 11th time, and I say, no, I call, like, I've had enough of your shenanigans. Now, Josh, because he's the aggressor, has to turn over his cards, and everyone can see what his cards are. And so now the bot would be able to see he did this with like an ace king suited. And
that's
so
more information.
Yeah, and and poker is all about information. And so one of the things is that Poker Tracker is the main one that they did. That was glorious. And so they could have the overlay pretty easy for the various tables, so you could see like this person is seeing the flop like 40% of the time, and he's seeing the river like X%, and like this is how aggressive they are, and they have metrics for like for their behavior, and so you can see like okay, and so you could have people who you don't consciously remember, like you're tracking what they're doing the best that you can, and you're doing it, but like you'll have. It's basically a reminder, and you'd have this reminder that like this person's seeing 10% of the flops, and he's bet never,
right?
And now he's doing it, and so you got like a little helper.
But I can imagine that if you had like, let's say, an AI bot,
Yeah, that
has
has
access
more
to that.
detailed access to which hands are exposed and all of that.
and it has the like computational statistics to like make
Yeah.
like snap judgments about what's
Yep.
the correct thing to do. So
Yeah,
you
because
were
they
talking-
can get nitty gritty nutty with your own thing. It'll tell you like these are all the different like ace kings that you've had as your win rate with the ace kings. These are like what you did with them, and it like knows the percentages. And
Yeah.
And,
And so what I'm imagining is you're talking about sharks and fish. Basically, if these are out there and they're relatively inexpensive, the place must be swimming with sharks. Like if you go on Poker Stars or whatever,
yeah,
like
I mean back in the
there's
day,
like 1,000 like AI bots that can out
Yes.
statistic you. I don't know about wanting to actually go on and try that.
yeah. So there is no reason why you could not make an AI bot that had access to the database. Because the humans, they just communicate the summary on the spot of what their general behavior is. But there's no reason why an AI bot wouldn't have full access to the detail of every hand that has ever been observed that you have ever seen,
Right.
with a memory perfect that be like far beyond any normal human memory.
Yeah.
And
fast.
and the ability to react to it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and like even if they were just like make recommendations or again ranges, right? And so that was another somewhat of a digression, is that you don't see things as for like this is what they have. You see like the ranges of, given the way that they've played this person put like 15% chance of ace king off suit, like a 40% chance of the straight draw, and like this is what they different are, and like these were all the different options. And so a robot that can do that instantaneously and accurately with a perfect memory would.
I don't think I'd play online.
Right.
I guess is what in this day and age.
Yeah, as soon as wind got out that any of them existed, like you. Yeah, like you could be pretty good, but no one's gonna want to play against
Yeah, I
an
mean
AI.
they've beaten chess and Go and these other. I don't know. Maybe poker's more complicated and nuanced than some of those, but
Well, I mean,
I guess the psychology is a big part of the poker.
there is, and then there's Star Trek, which is also we're all fans of.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. But before, I just wanted to kind of wrap up a little bit with this current topic.
yeah.
So, you mentioned you like math and chemistry and stuff because like the certainty.
Actually,
and-
chemistry is the only hard science that I don't like.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. That's how you introduced yourself. So, Josh, I know
Yes.
you do. I mean, you're obviously into math. You're teaching math. Were you drawn to math for similar reasons that Joe was describing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like the certainty, and I also like the puzzle solving aspect. Like a lot of it feels like you have these parameters, and then you're trying to like solve the puzzle. Another thing in terms of simplexity, if you want to call it that, is, when you first come up with an idea for a proof, usually it's pretty clunky and ugly. And then you have to like comb it a bunch of times and then clean it up. And then you present it and it just looks pristine, but you don't see all the
work.
all the behind the screen scratch work that went into it.
That's a good. Okay, so now I have an analogy for you for
I
simplexity.
love analogies.
So, all right, so you've written a code and you have like some for loop that goes back, and every time it like adds +1, and you have something else that and you have this like paragraph of code that does something, but really you could do that whole thing with just like one line with some smart notation.
Yep.
That's the simplexity that we like. I think that's the simplexity that you
I
mentioned.
can get behind that. I can get behind that.
We gotta defend our title.
Yeah. No, I can get behind that. They have that both from the user typing it out, making it simpler, and then they also have the code, the language itself does that. And so
there are some languages that are more complex and less.
Well, one of the things that programmers love to do is programming ways to make it easier for themselves to program.
Mm-hmm.
And so the operation, it's called an AJAX request, a get or a fetch request. It's basically what enables the modern internet of the ability to just get information, and the way to do it without having to like reload the entire web page every time, right? Remember way back when the internet like started, like you'd have to reload the entire page for new info, or like your mailbox, you don't refresh the mailbox, you refresh the entire screen. You refresh the entire screen.
Yeah. Same thing is true with like video compression. If it's like multiple frames and the next frame has the exact same color black in that spot,
Yes.
you don't redo it every time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me of the two different styles of game lag, which is also, in my nerdy opinion, interesting. And so they have this is a digression, but that's fine. So
All about digressions.
they have two key schools of thought when it comes that I'm aware of. I don't have a degree in competitive gaming creation programming, but they basically have two schools of thought. So they have, I think the biggest one that I'm aware of is Smash Brothers. And so for Smash Brothers, what their code is that all systems in play communicate with each other for every frame.
Mm-hmm.
And so you will push the buttons and you will do one thing, and they will push the buttons and then they will do their thing.
Mm-hmm.
And for every frame, you need to keep it on the same page. And so for that, what that means is that now if there is lag, you will play the game in slow motion because you're like waiting.
Oh, if it's like online, you mean, rather than?
Yeah, well, this is online. These are
Okay.
These are systems that are talking to each other. So
Right.
if you've got like Mario versus Bowser, Mario will say run, Bowser will say blow fireball,
Right.
and the two systems need to talk to each other constantly, and they will not progress the game until all systems have completed their handshake.
That makes sense, especially if it's competitive, right? So if someone's ahead of you in the
Well, yeah,
technology.
there's advantages to both. I mean, ideally, you don't have any internet lag at all, and then they're all functionally the same, right? And so, that will as you play this, right? It's now listening for. You're basically saying, okay, I'm still holding right joystick. This is my speed, and Bowser's like, I'm still holding the fire button. I'm still breathing fire, and then they're communicating. And then it would like change. It's like, I am now hitting the jump button. I'm going to go over the fire and wait for that handshake to complete. And Bowser's like, okay, I guess I'm going to stop breathing fire and I'm going to adapt somehow.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something else. Now, the other school of thought, which I think is a lot more prevalent, is it's an assumption system. I think there's a word for it, but I don't know it. But it's cool. So it's an assumption system where it says, we are going to assume that you're just going to keep doing what you're already doing until we get told otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And so if there is now lag, you don't get slowdown,
Yeah.
you get skipping. And that's where the games with the skipping come from.
Okay.
So like a game like, I think Counter-Strike is probably a good one. Now you'll be running along normally, and because it's just going to assume like that guy's just running where he was, and you're just going to keep him going there.
Yeah.
And then when the internet catches up, it's like, oh, he stopped running.
And he made a left turn.
Yeah, and he did a left turn. And so now you'll just see this guy go, whoop, or like he'll just like vanish. And so that's like a different...
It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Because playing in slow motion, especially something like Smash Bros,
Yes.
totally jack with your reflexes and timing, right?
And it's a very reflex-heavy game.
Yeah.
And they already have in play a system which intentionally delays it. 7 frames, which is a little more than a tenth of a second. But in a game where like involves reflexes,
You can feel it.
yeah. And so now you have your the idea is that all different controller types would have the same advantage if they have like if they have a forced lag. But now you have that lag on top of that you're fighting your internet. And so it's like even worse. And so
The jump one sounds like it'd be more useful if it's like an MMO.
yeah.
Just because like if one person goes out, that doesn't freeze the whole system.
Yeah, imagine like an EverQuest raid where, especially like before they restricted it, where you have 120 people in your raid, and you need all of them to like, are we all on the same page?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so then you would just have like someone lagging. that would be
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, I mean, the timing in EverQuest 2 required a lot less information. Like, if you're next to the enemy and your attack is on, like,
yeah.
it's not going to be too complicated.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of auto attacks there.
Mm-hmm.
I know that there would be times where you like would need to like hit your heal. I think the healers needed a pretty constant connection. Like your auto attack is a lot different than the I'm going to heal the tank right now.
Yeah. EverQuest. Classic.
The best MMO.
Yeah.
Which, maybe its own topic. I don't know. So, I think one of the topics that we're thinking about talking about is like what is fun, what makes things fun.
Yeah, let's do that.
And EverQuest is.
Do you already have like the whole thing mapped out on what is good about EverQuest and all?
Oh, well, actually, coincidentally, like skipping back a little more about me and Jack of all trades is that I did have I had a stint back in 2013 where I wanted to be a professional YouTuber, which was not really a thing at the time. They call them influencers these days. So I wanted to be an influencer before influencers was a word that like really stuck with society.
Imagine if they actually got it back then.
Yeah, an influencer.
Ooh, Nelly.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get the traction to begin with.
Well, there was attraction, and it was also capital again. So
yeah.
I would want like multiple cameras. I did invest in one camera, but I realized I would want multiple cameras. I would want like props. I would want to pay people something for their time, even though they wouldn't be getting like Hollywood wages.
No. Yeah.
I would want I actually did manage to invest in Adobe, the Adobe suite, and get like professional editing. But there was just a lot. My vision, my resources to enable my vision were insufficient to what I really wanted to do. Mm-hmm. But I had several videos laid out as to like what would make the perfect Elder Scrolls, and ironically, that game still hasn't come out yet. So this would have been 2013. The main commenter at the time that I would have been using for footage would have been Elder Scrolls 5. And so now we are 11 years later, and there's still no Elder Scrolls 6. So.
They're talking about it. They're talking.
So they say. Which is sort of ironic. And so I've given a bit of thought as to what makes certain games fun. And a lot of it is, of course, subjective, but I think a lot of it, there's a psychology behind it that I think a lot of people would agree with. And
personal preference too, right?
Yeah.
It's different.
Well, I think progress is a big part of the idea that like you are now better than you were. Either you are or your character is. And so you can have like a fighting game where you don't really, your character doesn't get better. Like Mario's not getting stronger. You're using Mario better. You are now practiced at
more skilled.
Playing the character Mario. Yeah. And then there are other things where like an MMO, like EverQuest is an example too. Like now Mario is getting stronger.
Yeah. And leveling up.
Yeah. Like your rogue. Yeah. And
the epic gear.
Yeah. And I think the progress and the feeling of progress is a big part of that. And so you have.
I remember in EverQuest also, one of your favorite things about that game is you literally start the game naked.
Yeah, pretty much.
A dagger.
Yeah.
It's like.
You get underwear and here's a rusty dagger.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Right.
And that was one of the fun parts. And so.
Because then your sense of progress is like, hey, I found some pants.
Yeah. So I got cloth pants. And they're not even chainmail yet. They're cloth.
Right. You're stabbing rats out in the field.
Yeah. I found a dagger. No, just a normal dagger. It's not rusty anymore. I've moved on to a normal dagger.
Collecting eyeballs and selling it for copper.
I'm not killing rats anymore. I'm killing bats now. I'm moving up in the world. And then eventually you're killing dragons as you wear this like mythic armor and like mithril chainmail with like legendary weapons that Galadriel would have given you, things like that. And there's something.
Well, the really wild thing about EverQuest too was it was one of the first online games, and I thought the progression was pretty cool. or massive online games, I should say.
I think it's number 2 generally credit. It's generally credited for being the second one,
Well,
the
Ultima
second MMO.
Online.
I think Ultima Online,
Yeah.
and then I think EverQuest.
Mm-hmm.
There may have been others, but I think as far as like public opinion and gaining true traction,
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's the second one.
Yeah.
But I think that it also pioneered it and put it to a place far beyond what just Ultima Online did.
Yeah. Well, and one thing it did that Ultima Online didn't do was this kind of raid thing.
Yeah.
That kind of blew my mind. Because when we were playing, like, we'd play 4 players on our whatever, right?
Yeah.
Or if we played like StarCraft or whatever, it's like up to 8. It's just how high you can go. But this is like literally, you got like 50, 60 people all working to kill a dragon so that maybe one item drops for someone.
Well, I mean, it depends.
I mean, it's more than that.
how
But
generous.
I'm just saying it's like such a small reward in all these people, and just seeing it, I don't know, it just really kind of eye-opening new experience of gaming.
I think that.
Did you have that sense or feeling when you were playing EverQuest?
I didn't have that feeling.
No, not with the raids. Fate's Defiance.
Well, it was tricky organizing it. Like, getting people motivated to like get together at a specific time, like to get, like you said, one item for one
you
person.
were an officer for a long time now.
I was like guild leader.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it really, like, a big part of it is the game mechanics of the combat for EverQuest is one of the things that made it entertaining. So you didn't just show up and you didn't just push buttons and the thing died and you did it like on Tuesdays. Like, it required a plan. Right. It required coordination. And so one of the key concepts that they had was they had mana. So the healers cannot heal forever. And then they had like hit points, right? So warriors are more durable than like rogues. Mm-hmm. And then the other thing that they had was like aggro. And so the more damage you do, the more mad the monster is. Mm-hmm. And when the monster will hit anyone not a warrior, kill them in one hit, like, things get tricky now. And so that required the coordination. So I remember back in the day where they would force like the rogues and the warrior and the mages and wizards to like wait. Because like they had to wait for the warriors to build enough aggro so that the monster would stay mad at the warriors instead of just immediately killing the rogue. Because if they all attack at the same time, the boss is now just going to immediately kill the rogues. Like, I hate you, you're hurting me the most.
Right.
So you need to like let them build up. And that required coordination. So you have one person running the show, And so I just remember it was so fun. I was the rogue. And so I'm there just like waiting, like the dagger. Both daggers just waiting. And the guild that I was in, they literally had the guy and this is before voice chat too. So like in all caps, just like, rogues, open fire!
It's like some Braveheart scene.
Yeah. Wait! Hold! Hold!
That's a meme too.
Fire! Yeah, that was a unique.
So the other thing too is in some of these bosses, I know there was like, I think a dragon that had like a breath attack. And so the warrior had to go on the other side and the whole team was on this side.
Yeah.
And if a rogue happened to pull aggro,
yes.
You'd turn around and just like
fire breath,
fry the entire raid,
yeah.
And then you'd get some messages from some people.
Yeah, the warrior would be in trouble.
Bang this guy, get him out of here, or whatever. It was usually the rogue, like that.
What was that meme about Leroy Jenkins? Wasn't it exactly that?
That was World. Yeah, well, it was World of Warcraft, and this guy just ran in and like started the raid before people were ready. Right?
Yep. Yeah.
He just like decimated everything.
Let's do this.
Right. It just totally ruined it for everyone. It was hilarious though.
Oh no, yeah.
But I'm sure being in the game that wasn't so funny.
I doubt that they were having fun that day. And it could also be really like if everything lines up, then it can be a lot of fun. And if it's not, then it can be a big chore. I had a different game that I used to play called Rift, which was between that and EverQuest were by far my favorites. I also played WoW, which is by far the most famous of the MMOs. But I think that Rift and EverQuest will always have a special place in my heart as being the two best, depending on which way you look at it. But I was in a guild in Rift, and we didn't have the coordination. And it also had the mechanics of like the dragon breath that's wiping out everybody. So you'd have like one person that ruins it for, I think it was 20 people per raid, but that's still like 19 people that die because one person didn't hit the space bar at the right time. And so what a lot of guilds will do is they'll get used to recovering really quickly. And so it's like, all right, get everybody back in position very quickly, and we're going to try again. And like, if you know what you're doing, you can do that. And like, it depends on the game and who's running it. But like 2 minutes, let's try again.
Yeah.
And the guild that I was in, it was literally like 30 minutes later, like just standing around, just like basically chatting for 30 minutes, waiting for the next attempt to like die. And like,
was this the one in like the hedge maze place?
No, I think it would have
different raid. Okay.
No,
I remember doing that multiple times and like reset.
Not the hedge mage.
Yeah, I forgot what the zone was.
The hedge mage was fun because I actually became a key member of that. I actually led the raid. That was like the first raid that I actually led, which was also different because I would historically attribute myself to being introverted. And I don't really like talking to more people than I have to.
Yeah.
And so choosing to, even if it's just digitally, coordinate 19 other people and like coordinate and give instructions and command like who to do what, that was a bit of a change of what I was used to. But I think that was also probably healthy, even if a lot of people in society think that maybe there's better ways to work on your communication skills. But
I think that's perfect.
I think that worked just fine because now we were on headset too, so we're not typing out anymore. We've entered the voice chat era.
Yeah.
And so now it's at the point where you are like looking at the situation, you actually have to like tell people what to do in order to get the job done. And so you'd have what they call ads or like additional monsters that are coming in. And so I was the tank at the time, so I'm taking most of the damage from the primary boss, and I would see like a wave of new monsters coming in, and I would like have to verbalize like, all right, off tank, they're coming in from the south. Like, let's get some there.
Yeah.
And like call them out, like be like, and some like when you get better at it, you like even more precision with the nuance of like Vextor, whatever their name is, right? Tank Vextor, can you go to the south lawn?
Right.
We need to block those from coming in. Our healers are there.
Yeah.
And then extra group 2 of healers, keep Vextor alive.
Did it work out? Did you guys take the boss down? Or?
We did.
Nice.
We did. We did it several times, and then that was one of the most fun things. And if you're a viewer and you can't afford in your life schedule to do an MMO, I would recommend that you find a fun one and do it for at least a little bit. MMOs are definitely the kind of thing where they become much more difficult down the road if you have things like kids or...
Right. Well, now a lot of game designers are specifically designing games that are more accessible to married couples with kids.
Yeah.
Because it's like our generation is now becoming there. And we grew up on these games.
Yeah, and the developers are like, maybe we shouldn't have non-stop must-dos.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember doing like 12, 15-hour sessions on EverQuest.
Oh, yeah. No,
Just
I mean,
unreasonable.
Grinding.
Yeah. No, the reason why I stopped EverQuest is because of a combination between that and then the guild not accepting that. And so I was, just for the record, this would have been back in the days of college, and I didn't have any commitments. So it was literally the only thing that I had to do was go to college, right? There's no kids, no crazy family. I mean, like I spent time with family, but like
bills to pay is the big one.
Yeah. So the general lifetime expenses are low. All I have to do is go to school and so I would play for like a lot. Actually, this might have been even thinking about the timing. This might have been the year that I took off before I went back to college. So this could just be just while I was working at Target.
It might be.
Yeah, and I could afford the time to do that, and I was like playing way more than anyone should, and I just wanted, I got into the second best guild on my EverQuest server, and I had a lot of fun. We rated all the top content, and it was a very unique experience, and it was just awesome. And I went on a family vacation, came back a week later, and I hadn't played in a week. And the culture of like guilds like that is like you need to play every day. And I guess they missed my message where they said I'm going to be gone. And so I literally came back to
They booted you?
I was booted from the second best guild in the server because I went on vacation for a week. And when I was like, I just went on vacation.
It sounds like you're an employee of the guild.
Pretty much. Yeah, that's a lot of the mindset. And and so at that point, as far as EverQuest went, I was just like, you know what? Like, I've seen all the top stuff. I've rated with the best of the best. I think I've got my fill. I'm not willing to play that absurd amount again and get back in the guild.
Sell your account for $1,000.
Yeah, and so now when you go forward and you play World of Warcraft or you play Rift, City of Heroes was a good one too. Now when you approach the guilds, you go forward with the expectation. They're like, hey, I will not be playing every waking moment anymore. And you like have the expectation of this is yeah, well, why would you do that? That's crazy.
Right.
So that is
so going back to what make games fun. So the first thing with EverQuest was there's a sense of progression, getting better and better and better.
Yep.
But also the thing in the MMO thing, I think that made it interesting was it added this element of, I guess, competition. It's like when Josh is sitting there with a leaf blower, it's like, oh my gosh, where did you get that? And so it's like, I gotta get it.
Yeah.
And then it's that same thing of like you want to have the most epic mythic thing that's so impossible to get.
Yep.
And everyone's kind of like a rival.
Yeah, there's a degree of competition. Like the rogues would like rival other rogues, and people want the best build, and people want to be like the best. It's like you could kill like the Lord of the Rings analogy, right? Like you could be Legolas, like I got this bow from Legolas, and like someone else like, well, I got this bow from Galadriel. It's like a very one-off, and it's like jealous and like.
But that didn't exist before, like the online social interaction of like an MMO.
The competitive with each other,
or to like I got this super cool item. Like maybe if you did that, like I'd say a console game.
I would say there's a certain. I don't know if that's true.
No,
there's a little bit of that in Magic the Gathering.
Yeah,
like the collectible aspect.
Well, because if you think about arcade games that have been around forever, right? In the 70s, you got like Donkey Kong. You have your 3 initials. You get your high score, and so now people are in the arcade. Like I need to get the higher score on Pac-Man and the arcade games. And I think that they're a little different though, because I would say that it's very different because you have like the frenemies aspect, where like it's a friendly competition now. Because now you have multiple people playing at the same time. So you could have 2 rogues that are like side by side trying to like be better than each other. And it'd also lead to some like social drama too, of like 2 rogues are helping killing the dragon, and it's they have like random loot that drops from the dragon. And so like, the crazy acid popped mithril blade falls from the dragon, and it's like, okay, which rogue gets it? And now
and there was some drama with a lot of that.
There's a lot of drama. There can be a lot of drama with that.
I've gone to X amount of raids and they weren't here last time,
and so they have like guilds would have websites with their loot distribution schedules like clearly laid out. Like every time you attend a raid, you get 10 points. If you get an item, your points reset. Or does it have? Like, which one is it?
But you're like buying it with your guild credits.
Yep. And you would like spend what you earned by attending raids, and and then some would just be like completely free for all, and then some would be like, what, wait, you're dating? What? Like,
trying to hit on this
you
girl.
don't.
Giving her some.
Yeah, I don't remember the names like 20 years later, but we have guilds that collapsed because it's like, yeah, the boss is just giving his girlfriend everything. The guild leader's just funneling. Like, all rogues are now hoes because...
I mean, how crazy is that? That's like some evolutionary biology stuff in the game. It's like the alpha male is like trying to get this girl by providing her resources.
Yeah. Well, they had...
It's like embedded in human behavior.
Yeah, and then they had the other way too, where it's like just finding teams that... finding teams to play with and like getting loot and just getting like help as you go and like getting power leveled and things like that.
Oh yeah.
One of the
You
things,
flaunt it, like, right? Like you just get the girl, like especially like voiceover, and they'll just like turn on as sexy voice as they can and like try to flirt just a little bit. And oh well, I guess I could hear this voice a little longer. Let's go beat things up. I'll help you out. Yeah. Oh, you want to say nice things to me? Okay.
one of the things I like about EverQuest is how almost all of it was organic, in the sense that like
Yeah.
guild stuff people just made up. You know, this point system and like membership and like where you would trade and how.
Yeah.
Like different generations would like try to integrate it and automate it. And I don't know, to me, I like the creative aspect.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like you can create your own website, you can do your own system.
EverQuest ultimately invented the bazaar system, right? Where you would go to
Comments.
a particular spot and you could like list things for property. But before that, and this is to Josh's point, they would just have places in the server that would organically form where people would get together, and then they would just make deals, like not verbally, but through text, one-on-one with direct interaction.
Or just like shouting into the zone.
Yeah, and so they had different ways that you could talk. So if you did a text, you could like be one-on-one with another player forever, and they had shouts where like only people in that area would hear it. And I had an itch. I like made an alternate character on a different server, and I noticed it was interesting that the different servers' culture had organically formed a different marketplace. Because the bazaar hadn't existed yet at this point. And so for our server, Kazakh right? Shout out. West Commons, I believe is what it was. Everybody was in the tunnel of West Commons. That's where everybody went. And I don't remember the name of it. No shout out. The other server that I had made this alternate character on, it was like a different, like that thing was just desolate. Like they decided to organically congregate somewhere else to do their shouting of like, this is what I'm selling.
So I think it was Eric who was telling me that his server had it in that elven city in the trees.
Oh, Kithkin.
Kithkin? Maybe. But yeah, but that just
Kelethin. That's what it was.
Oh.
I was a wood elf, so I remember my hometown.
Yeah, but it's just so crazy how that starts up, and I agree they don't have that kind of culture anymore in these games.
Yeah, and a lot of what they do is they'll just like give you a full set of gear at the start, and EverQuest actually for the magic classes started you out even worse. So all the melee classes that had like swords and physical weapons, when you hit, like you would always hit. But for the magic classes, they had a mechanic called fizzling. And so when you first started out, your spell literally would not cast at all. And so for most games, like the sensation of progress is like, oh, I shoot a fireball, like I shoot like a spark. And then you move from the spark to the fireball, and you move from the fireball to like meteor, and you move from meteor to like thunderstorms, right? And this is entertaining because now you can do things. Like it looks visually more appealing. It's like you're watching a movie, and like this is like looks cooler as you go, and you can like kill bigger things that you previously couldn't, and you've got a puzzle to solve as to like how am I going to become the strongest? Like what choices? And like and then EverQuest, because of the fizzling system, you actually start even less than that. Like you can't even complete your spark.
Yeah.
Right? Your little like ember shot. Like you can't do that. It just fizzles, and you watch your mana just boop, 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 and it's like.
And you're in your underwear at the same time.
Yeah, while you're in your underwear, holding a broken twig for a wand. But then you go from like, okay, I can cast my ember like 50% of the time now, and then you're like, I can always cast my ember. This is cool. And so you're actually like starting from terrible, like even worse, catching up to like normal. And it's like, okay, well now it kind of fizzles when I do my fireball. So I should use my ember, and then you get better. And then, okay, now I can do my fireball whenever I want. Now I can do my meteor whenever I want. Yeah. And that was a degree of fun as well. That
totally, you know, all leading into that progression kind of thing.
Yeah.
There were a couple other. So when we were doing games back in the day and thinking about this, we had a couple of points that were needed for a good game. Can you remember some of the other ones?
You wrote it down too.
Progression was on there. That was like actually, I think, the top one.
Yeah, and there was something like story or like fantasy element.
Yeah, that is another thing that's sort of I wouldn't really call it my core identity, but it's like one of those things that I say, right? So there are, if you want to group them together, you have books, TVs, and movies. Mm-hmm. Those are all one. They're like a story that's being told cinematically. And then you have sports, and that's another group. And then you have video games. So these are three different things, like a Venn diagram that overlaps, right? And so for stories, movies, and books, mm-hmm. these things, you can have an amazing story, like Tales of Epic Adventure, Lord of the Rings. You can have great visuals. You can have like the Avengers, like things that look cool, they're entertaining. They can be mentally compelling, like books and like philosophical issues and things of that nature. But ultimately, for the vast majority of these stories, the good guys will win, right? Mm-hmm. And so even if it's like a slasher film, like, you know that the good guy's going to win. It's just a question of like how many people are going to see the end credits, right? So it's like you watch Lord of the Rings, like they're saving the world. How many of these heroes, like the real thing, if you haven't seen it before, is like, well, mm-hmm. I don't know who's going to make it to the end credits. Mm-hmm. And it's a well-told story, but you know that they're going to win. Yeah. So then shifting over to sports, that's a whole different thing now. And so now it's like the bad guys in the situation, they're not really trying to like extinguish good throughout the universe, and they're not trying to take over the world, and they're not trying to kill anybody, but the bad guys can now win in sports. And so now like you have no certainty. And so I think I don't watch a ton of sports because I have no control over it, but I think that's one of my favorite things about sports is that the bad guys can win. Like you're not guaranteed a victory anymore. No. But also you're not really like saving the world, and you don't have like a well-told story. And you could get into like, oh, this player's life is interesting, but at the same time, the sport itself, you have no control of the outcome, even if it's fun to watch. Yeah. And that is where video games is a shining spot in my heart, because now you can have a crazy, well-told story. Mm-hmm. Not all of them are, but that's the same with movies these days as well. So you can now have like a great, well-told story, and you can have amazing like visuals and pizzazz. And now you also can have a control over the outcome. And so you can sometimes choose your difficulty levels, and sometimes they're too hard, sometimes they're too easy. But you are now directly choosing actions and options mm-hmm. to solve a puzzle and be the victor. And so sometimes that puzzle to solve is, do I want to be a fire mage or do I want to be an ice mage? Mm-hmm. And then sometimes it's like, it doesn't like, and then sometimes it's an actual puzzle. You're playing Tetris. Like mm-hmm. I need to put these together, or things of that nature.
Right. So it reminds me, okay, so once you were saying that, it reminds me of another thing that was on our list, which I think was that a good game needs to have meaningful choices. Yeah. Meaningful decisions. Like, you need to be able to influence the outcome of what's happening. Because if it's like, I attack you with this, or I use a fireball, or I do this, and they all die, it's like, what kind of game is this?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that is good about Diablo, for example, mm-hmm. is that they introduce ways so that people can play however they want, while there's advantages to each. And so if you take the fireball route, they will eventually introduce enemies that are immune to different elements, right? And so now it's like they will introduce an enemy that's completely immune to fire. Mm-hmm. And so now your choice to go with fire is now limited. So you need to choose a secondary to deal with fire with people who are immune to fire. Or you need to team up with like an ice mage, and like you can both just like specialize, and that's also fun.
Definitely.
And there's
you need to have some kind of consequence. Like you can play the game bad, I guess is what I'm saying. And if you make bad choices, you're going to lose.
yes,
There are some games I can't think of one off the top of my head where it just like it feels like no matter what you do, you're just gonna win.
yeah,
And it's like
I think that
Or it's just random, like you roll a die. Yeah, I won, but it's like I didn't make a meaningful
right.
choice.
Yeah.
That's the meaningful part of it.
I have a friend of mine who this is a slight digression, but he's very smart as well. And we were given a IQ test, and I was given like brilliant feedback. Come join our think tank, right? And so we decided to have fun, and we decided to put our brains together. Two reasonably smart people. What is the worst solutions that we could come up with? And so we, for each question of this IQ test, we chose what is the absolute dumbest answer. And it's like, your IQ is 105. You should join our think tank. And I'm like,
Rigged.
I don't know if I can trust that my IQ is really 142 anymore.
Right.
So
Maybe
I think
your IQ is already so low you can't even figure out the stupidest response.
we're just gonna say you did. There's
Join our club. Pay the
Yeah.
membership fee.
yeah.
There's the opposite of that though. Is a game that no matter what you do, you suck. And I played that recently, and
Punishing.
this comes to the realm of a phone game. So a lot of phone games will do is the pay to win strategy. So a lot of the good phone games, what they'll do is it will be fun even if you do not pay them, and you can just keep playing. And then the people who do pay will have fun beating you up here and there, and that is fine. People who think that they're going to be the best of the best and not pay anything are incorrect. So a lot of games can be fun like that, but this particular game, you could not win. Like you'd play for one day and you realize I don't win. Like I invest in this skill and I'm now like 2% better. Like I'm still losing.
Yeah.
I'm now losing like 10 seconds more slow. It was like a survival game where like waves of zombies come at you.
Yeah. That sounds like
That's
a
terrible.
progression thing that isn't implemented well.
Yeah.
There's no sense of like
Yeah.
you have efforts, you make choices, you try different things, and the outcome's all the same.
Yeah, and so then it reaches the point where you're like, okay, for games like that they call it a paywall. Where like this is how far you can get. If you want to get better than this, you have to pay money, and they often call that a paywall. And so for this particular game, Bang Bang Survivor, by the way, I would avoid it.
Bye bye Bang Bang Survivor.
Hopefully they don't have really good lawyers. And they want to take down your podcast.
I think we're allowed to have opinions here on products and things.
That was terrible. And so you quickly realized that you cannot get anywhere, and they just expect you to pay purely immediately within like 2 days. So I would I recommended that to you, and it also has it has a multiplayer element where you can like fight together, and so that's why I thought it'd be interesting for you to get on. So I when I first found it, I recommended it, thinking that this might be good.
Right.
Like get in on day one. I'm starting now. This could be good. And then I also like recommended it to Holly, because couples things can be fun too. And neither of you were really that interested. And the more I played it, the more I realized like, this is terrible. I cannot remember the last time that I hated a game as much as I did.
Right.
This is pretty bad.
Well, and so I think games that are difficult are also fun. Like I had a fascination for a while with like these rogue type games. I think is what they're called. Have you heard of them?
I've heard the term, but I haven't associated with it.
Okay. It's basically you die and you start as like hardcore.
Oh, Slay the Spire. Is that
No.
count?
What's that one game with the sticks?
Yeah, the Magicite.
Magicite, yeah.
Oh,
It's like that, or it's like like classic Nintendo game. It's like you're playing
Gauntlet?
Metroid. Gauntlet.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect. So I think there was actually a game called Rogue, and it was like really old school like that, and that's where they got it from.
Huh.
But like a Gauntlet game, it's like you go through and then you die and then game over, start over. I guess they have like a password system,
Yeah.
but it's just they're really difficult, and if you make a mistake, you're dead. You have to start over again.
Yeah.
There's some kind of satisfaction with that one, and also like an intensity as you get farther and farther. You're like,
Yeah.
oh shoot,
Yeah.
and then you see something new you haven't seen before, and
Like,
then like
yeah.
some trap happens, and then you're just like F.
Yeah. And you
And, like,
lose.
next time. I know where that trap is now.
Yep. Yeah. Those are fun.
Yeah, but they can. So what I'm saying is those are extremely difficult, but you're still having some sense of progression.
Let's call it hardcore mode.
Yeah.
Hardcore, excuse me. Yeah, hardcore mood.
One of the shout outs I would say for an incredibly well done experience is, and you actually introduced me to it, and then I, from my personality, just took it to 11.
Is it a time?
XCOM Enemy Unknown is
Oh, you played that a
one-
lot too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
XCOM Enemy Unknown is one of the best challenge balance games I think I've ever played. It does not give it to you, but your choices matter, and they're usually brutal. So you actually play a lot, and like, okay, if I like, you'll have these normal aliens. It's waves of different aliens will come and attack you, right? And so
And then also has that called Iron Man mode.
yeah. So my crowning achievement for that game was I did beat it on hard difficulty with Iron Man mode.
Wow.
And so Iron Man mode means that you cannot have multiple saves, just for anybody watching. And so a lot of games, what they'll do is you'll have multiple save files. You can load up alternate save files, and you can save it whenever you want.
It's like, do I go left? Do I go right?
Yeah.
I go left. Oh, that was bad. Let's go back to the same point and go right.
Yeah, yeah. Or like, yeah. And so you can choose what the best outcome timeline is every time. And some people call that safe scumming, right? So you'll just at every point in time is the best point in time that it could have been. And so Iron Man it has one save file, and it is automatically saving, and you cannot go back. And so you are kind of, it's turn based, but it's like every decision that you make, there's just no going back.
Yeah, and I also like it too because that particular game has like a story aspect.
Yeah.
And part of the story unfolds based on your choices. So like if you do a particular type of research, one thing happens, but if you like build a building instead of doing research, something else happens.
Yeah.
And with Iron Man, it's like part of the timeline.
Yeah, and yeah, you've got these checkpoints of how good are you doing, like progress wise, before you get there. And so a lot of what they do is, I remember the game that I had won because you do have these checkpoints. And so the idea is like as you kill the aliens, humanity can like reverse engineer a lot of their technology. And so you have
Like you
start with
scavenge the
bullets,
pieces.
and then it goes to lasers, and then it goes to plasma.
Railgun.
Yeah, the rail plasma, that sniper rifle is just amazing.
I actually have not played this game like much. I
you've-
think I've played
dude, you're
maybe an
missing
hour. Okay, that's on my list. That will be. I'll have to do my homework. On
It's epic. But the Iron Man run that I won, I just remember getting like the laser like way ahead of the standard checkpoint. It's like I have laser tech very early this run, and like it just take it and run, and like
So you knew that run was going to be good because
I was like, yeah, this is a good run.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you'll have runs like that where you're like what did I do right that I should do again, and like what went wrong, and like you'll it's the games like that are fun because you get to learn from your experiences, and you can like make a plan. So you'll get a option for an upgrade of like, would you like your armor to go from 5 to 10, or would you like your gun to go from 5 to 10? And you would play through, and you're like, well, I'll get my armor from 5 to 10. And then you play, and like, oh, well, the enemy's doing 10 damage. So you're dead in one shot either way. And like, oh, maybe I should kill him faster then. I'll get the gun next time. And so those decisions are fun. And so if you wanted a poorly made game, I'd be like, well, their armor is 50. You're never going to kill them in time.
Yeah.
And now you're like, this game sort of sucks.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a pretty old game, right? They came out with XCOM like 10, 15 years ago or something.
Something like that.
Something like that.
So, have they come out with like that? Has that company produced anything new or recent?
They made XCOM 2, which actually assumes that you lose XCOM 1.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the story of XCOM 2 assumes that you lose XCOM 1 and the world has been taken over by aliens. You are the resistance and you have to take it back.
Okay.
And I've never beaten it, and I kind of should.
Okay. But would you say the first one's better than the second one? Or
I think that I would say that it is because I finished the first one and I did almost everything that I could do.
Yeah.
And the second one is not as much. They introduced some mechanics in the second one, which it has been a while, so I don't really remember my primary critiques, but it just was not the same.
Fair enough.
I think.
Did you play 2?
You like it? Yeah. I didn't play XCOM 2 a whole lot.
I think actually a big part of it is that you couldn't really tell. It was harder to get a feel for how well you were doing with each run. Yeah, so as you're playing XCOM 1, especially if you're not in Iron Man mode and you reach these checkpoints, your decisions can sort of like reflect like how well you're doing. Like I got lasers really early, and so this is really good. Or like I got a particular officer upgraded very quickly, and this is good. And then the outcome will, like the better these are, like the longer you'll last, or if you aren't in Iron Man mode and you can like keep time going super optimally, like how much easier it is to win, right? And so you feels like you had a better sensation of how good you were doing. And then I feel like for XCOM 2, I think part of my critique, having not played it in a while, is that I think the sensation of how well you're doing is sort of gone. And so for XCOM 1, as you go into a fight, you can sort of predict, like, okay, I am fighting against these guys. This is going to hurt. I might lose like 2/5 of my crew. And I feel like for XCOM 2, you're just like, it wasn't unentertaining, but it was more nebulous. So just like,
yeah.
Do
you think it's
stuff happened?
Yeah. Do you think it's because you just knew the XCOM 1 system so well that you knew like how good laser tech was, moving parts, or
potentially? Another thing actually that I really liked about XCOM 1 is that they had a perk. They had an in-game mechanic where you could get random perks, and I loved that. And so what that means is that they had different classes. They had like the assault guy with the shotguns. They had the snipers. They had like the heavy artillery, and they had like assault rifles. And so each of these classes would get different moves. And so most of these moves could be used for any class. So like one of them would be like, you can run or you can shoot and run. So for the game mechanics, people had 2 turns. You could run, or you could shoot, or you could run. And if you were to shoot first, you couldn't use your second action. But some of these, like one of the classes could get a perk where you can now shoot and then run. And so if you're like right next to a guy, you can now afford, I'm going to shoot him in the face with the shotgun,
all right,
and then I'm going to run.
This game it's like on a tactical grid, right?
Yes. This game is played on a tactical grid overhead, and you make these choices just for the people who've not seen XCOM. Right. And so for XCOM 1, they had the ability to randomize it. So if it didn't need that particular weapon, you had the ability to get it for any class. So your sniper could shoot and then run. Whereas in the standard game without that option on, like only this one class could get that option. And their skill tree each was like 2 choices. And now with the random, like now you have 7 things that you could get like, as you went. And number 2 did not have this option. They didn't have the option to mix it up. And from what I remember of the workshop too, and like mods, they didn't have that either. So one of my favorite things was just like the randomness of things coming through was not there.
Yeah, so you say randomness is kind of a good thing to add into a game system to keep things interesting.
I often like randomness in most endeavors. I think that for competitive endeavors, it can be bad, but I think it's a little of a digression. But
yeah, we're talking about like what makes a fun game and what kind of aspects should be.
Yeah, because at a certain point you want to keep it fresh. So even if you like repetitive things, eventually you're just gonna be like, I've done this before. Like what am I gonna do? And so if you could optimize even. You could have a more optimum strategy if your classes had the same moves every single time. But for XCOM, it was like the opportunity for your class to get something that was even better that another class has. Like that was amazing. There was like I think it was like the ability to like shoot and then move. It's like I want to be able to do that with all my classes, and I want this option available. Oh, and another thing that's possible because they go down the levels, right? And I think it was also the way that it was randomed. You could also go into the future, so you could give like a lieutenant a move that a like commander could get. Interesting. How they unlocked it, if I remember correctly. So, but that was like an advantageous random.
Yeah.
I think that.
But some level of uncertainty. Now that you mentioned that, I think that was another thing on our list, because then that just can maybe. Yeah, well, if it's like a competitive game and you're playing against each other, that little bit of uncertainty means even if you're not very good, you still have a chance. Like you still gotta
top deck or crit.
And so it makes it kind of exciting.
Yeah, I think poker again has a lot of that because that can lure a lot of people too. Because it's like I have 4 cards to straight, like I could get the straight on the last card, and so now you've. Fish is the term, just people who play every single hand. Right? They're just going to be like, well, I could get a straight.
But like,
I have hope.
Yeah, but if you're just playing poker, like a party with some friends, and you're playing with like fake money.
Yeah.
It's like your grandma could come in and never play and actually win and be, hey,
Yeah.
So there's some element of that it increases like the social interaction.
Same with Magic too.
Yeah. Magic does that too, that you're not going to get good lands every time, or you're only going to get land every time. Yeah, I love the game of Magic, and card deck building is also an interesting source of fun. And then playing against other decks and seeing how it fares. And I have had. Would you say I've had more than my share of?
You definitely have a lot of decks.
Yes, so I have embraced proxy, which is the idea of you just say that you have this card done by printing up a card, and I'm not counterfeiting it. I'm not selling them, but I just say I have this card, and then I would print it up and I would put it in. And
try before you buy.
Pretty much. I calculated once that I think at the time I would run the number for having 33 decks. So I made a deck of every color identity plus the slivers. Right? So that's a total of 33 for this endeavor. And so
it's a little OCD, Joe.
It's a bit much.
A little bit.
Yeah, and digital ones have been added since then that have not been printed.
Yeah.
But I calculated at the time that if I were forced to get the real card for each, if I were to convert all my decks into real cards, it would cost like $25,000.
Not bad.
Yeah. So it's like, you know what? Like, I don't have time in life to play this game much less any one particular deck much.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it would cost you $25,000, but in 10 years, that actually might be an investment. These cards could go up. Don't joke.
I've got a Sliver Queen, which I bought for $40, which I swore was going to be the most money I'd ever spent, and she's now worth $300.
There you go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I think that's
better than Bitcoin.
The biggest investment. Wow, that's not entirely true. It's close to Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
But I mean, part of the sad thing is like the land base is stupid expensive if you want to make multicolor decks. So a lot of
there are bargain options, but yeah, the dual lands are crazy.
They're all handicapped, every single one of them. like they can be streamlined, but all of them have a drawback, and some are pretty like the ones, is it Alara? I don't know what set they're from. The tri-lands, the tap lands, those are bad. You get 3 colors, but they're coming in play tapped every single time. You have the shock lands where you can pay 2 life, but if you drop 10 of those, 2 life every time really stings. You have lands where if you already have 2 basic lands, then in play, then you can now play your dual land not tapped. But now it's like if you're playing a 5-color deck, what are the odds that you already have 2 basic lands? Probably low. And then you have all sorts of...
How much are those duels worth? Like the Island Tropical Island?
800-ish a pop.
Per? I guess it depends on the set, too.
Yeah, alpha, beta.
Yeah.
Unlimited, revised.
They're expensive. But
You've got a bunch of those, don't you?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, they're expensive. And then you have nuances of it gets banned. So I think I was at a financially sweet spot, and I was thinking, like, do I want to get a real Leovold? Like, this deck sounds fun. Not to play against, but I like the idea, and I haven't made a stacks deck in a while. Maybe I want a real Leovold for like $20.
What's Leovold?
So basically, he makes you want to die. I think any time an opponent draws a extra card besides the first one, you draw it instead.
Oh, okay.
And then he has something else.
If the opponent targets your creature, you draw a card.
Yeah. So pretty much
you're stealing their draws, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
extra draws.
If you try to get rid of it, you draw a card.
Yeah. So I literally, thankfully I didn't even burn the printer money, but I went into tapped out at the time, which is good. But if you do want to make decks, Moxfield is amazing. Go to Moxfield. So,
you mentioned a card
the card, yes. Tapped out on the website. I digitally planned the deck and I made everything, and I was about to start printing out a Leovold deck to bring here, and so you guys could have so much fun playing against Leovold. And he was literally banned the next day. And I was just like, well, and that just sort of like opened your eyes. It's like, imagine dumping, I don't know, $500 between him, all the other creatures, the 3 set kinds of dual lands to make it work smoothly, just to be banned.
Yeah.
And you can repurpose those lands. It's like, okay, I'm going to have a black, blue, green deck somewhere else. So those aren't a waste, that they're real, but I'll just find a different commander, I guess. But at the same time, the principle remains. Is like, it's just way too expensive.
What do you guys think has caused Magic to last so long and still be like really popular? Because it was like, what, back in the 80s? And it's a card game.
Well, it was like 94, 95, 96.
Yeah. I remember playing it in like elementary school, middle school.
Yeah. So what about it has like allowed it to be so popular and just sustain? And they just keep making new sets.
I think the creativity is a huge part, and the ability to come up with a theme and like stick with it. And I think there's a competitive side as well, that like yours is the best. Yeah, and the collectible side. And so for me, the collectible side means absolutely nothing, but I like the theme behind it. And so I used to just crap out themes, and now I like try to make them as good as I can. But you know, when I think of a theme, I think of like what cards can meet the basic utility that are specific to this theme, that work efficiently and are fun, but you just won't see in a normal deck, right? And so...
Okay, so you like to make like novel things that like people are like, what is the heck is going on here?
Yeah, or just like cards that seem cool that you just want to like take to 11, right? And so I think one card might be the Ashen Rider. It was one that I made was inspiring. And so it is 8 mana to drop.
Wasn't that your Eiley deck where you wanted to like
Yes.
exile everything?
Yes. Yeah. Which recently changed to a different commander, but alas. So that is a card that is 8 mana to drop, which if you don't know is a lot. And it's tricky, and it has to be white or black. It's limited to those. And so when it enters the battlefield, something gets exiled, and if it dies, then you exile something. Mm-hmm. And so that is a lot of mana to do that. But now what happens if the theme of your deck is like exiling, right? So now the theme of your deck is exiling. So you're like, okay, I don't care if it's expensive. This like really meets my theme. I want an excuse to like fit it in here. And so then you think of like, how can I make it work? And so what if you had like a death and revise mechanic? And so you find a way to kill it and then bring it back immediately. And so now it's like, oh. And so they have, I had a weapon in there called the Myriad Blade. I think it was what it's called. And so basically when you attack, for every opponent that you have, it will copy itself and will go. And so theoretically, if you were to put that blade on
and
this
at the
thing,
end of combat, you kill the creature.
yeah. And so as they attack, they enter, things get exiled, and then you can kill the creature. It's a pretty dark game in this aspect. And then when they die, now you're exiling more. And if you've got a good sack deck and like recovery, graveyard play, you could kill the main guy too, and then like bring it back. And so
I'm really understanding. So when you guys say like creativity, there's like so many cards and combinations, and you can get really clever with how you like combine things.
It was personalized too.
Yeah.
And it's yours. It's like your deck. This is my deck.
I actually have a deck that I call EverQuest.
Yeah.
There are some cards that were made that they give an experience counter to you, and then the more experience you have, the more benefit there is when you use experience. And they're not made to work together, and some of them are very clunky. But if you, that's sort of the idea. It's like my theme is the experience. I'm going to try and make these guys work the best they can together, even though they weren't really made to. Mm-hmm. And so now it's like one of them, if you cast a creature that's 5 mana or greater, you'll get experience. And then you have another one of them is if their power is 2 or less, then you get experience. And you have all these different criteria about how do I get experience and like what do I do with the experience. And one of the creatures, and so the idea is like what cards are not advantageous to put in this deck, which might not make the cut in other decks. And it's a card called the Acidic Ooze, I believe is what it is.
I don't know that one.
So it is now a 5. It's a ooze, obviously.
Oh, acidic slime.
Acidic slime, that's the one. So it's 5 mana. So now you trigger that, and it has 2 power. So if you were to cast it with both of those in play, you now get 2 experience. But what it does is it destroys enchantments or artifacts.
Or land.
Or land, which I forgot because it's been a while. But one of the mechanics that you want to deal with is like you need to make mana, you need to remove various sorts of cards, you need to answer threats, right? And then you have the rest of the deck is whatever you want. But you have these basic concepts that you need to remove threats and you need to make benefits for yourself. And so if you just blindly sit down, it's really easy to just like, this is great at white card, like I'm just gonna use swords and plowshares every game. And like these are just the staples and every deck is the same and like 3 cards are different. And so part of the fun is like, how can I change this to be like unique? And it's like, well, I could put another Croson Grip in this deck again, like the last 8 green decks that I made. Or Acidic Ooze would be really cool right now.
Fulfill
the 6 slime.
The same role.
Yeah.
But in a fun, different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing that seems like it's really attractive to Magic is creativity, right? There's so many moving parts and you can make a really unique deck. At the same time, like let's say you don't know Magic very well and it's like you start playing and there's like literally like 500,000 different cards printed.
More.
per
I
time?
think 30,000.
30,000. Okay, I don't
Something at this point.
Something absurd.
Unique number of cards,
Yeah.
and someone's new, and it's like, this looks kind of complicated.
Yeah.
So, what does it do to overcome that? Or like what I'm saying is like, there's still like new young people starting to join and play this game, even though it's like so complex. I feel like you need to have years of experience to know what's going on.
Well, usually, the way they designed it is that you would start with standard, which is just the most recent sets, and you'd build a deck based on that card pool. And then the older formats, like Modern, has more sets you could use, and then Commander just like everything you could use. So they recommend you start with standard and just get used to that card pool, and then like after you learn the basics, then you can just read the cards to figure out the rules.
So they basically have like, whatever edition is the current core plus the 3 sets or something.
They've changed it
I think it's
Okay.
4.
No, it's 4.
I think it's just a flat 4 right now.
But okay,
But I could be wrong,
that at least
'cause I
like,
haven't
limits the complexity for people starting, right?
Yeah.
I also know the most popular format now is Commander.
Yeah.
And they sell a lot of pre-constructed decks. So you just like buy a deck, it's already set up, you just shuffle it up and play with friends. And so a lot of people just learn to play that way.
Right.
And and it's casual, so like you don't have to be really good at it. You just have to like, read and figure it out as you go.
Right. There just seems like so much chaos that can happen, and just fun social time.
And like how you go about making the deck for that. I've had to rework some decks just because it takes too long to process.
Too many triggers.
Well, not necessarily too many triggers, but too many triggers that take too long to think about what the best thing to do. Yeah. So I had Mormor Vig is the blue-green deck that I had originally. And so what he does is anytime you play a green card, you draw. Anytime you play a green creature, you draw. And anytime you play a blue creature, you can tutor for a creature card.
And put it on top of your library.
And put it on the top of the card. On top of your library, yeah. And so tactically, that's really nutty, especially if you play a blue and a green, because you now stack it so they go immediately into play. But socially, now when you're playing with like 4 other people at the table, and you now, unless you know your deck really well, and if you're crazy and you made 33 decks, you don't know your deck well enough for this, right? Now you're wondering like, okay, what card do I want to be best for this situation? And so now you have analysis paralysis, and you're like taking too long, and you're like thinking like, which card do I want to tutor for? And that opportunity comes up every time your commander's out and you would cast a blue or a green creature
Yeah.
So that's kind of nutty. And so I changed my blue-green deck to a clone deck, which blue-green is also good at. And I've always wanted to make that theme. So there's that. But it also very much reduces the analysis paralysis and taking up everybody's time as I try to like think of what the best thing on my 90 cards left. What do I want to tutor, right? And so now it's just like, what do I want to clone, which is a lot better and more entertaining. And then when you also have a plan as to what you're going to clone, like put some, what's it called? I'm forgetting the card. It's so much fun. I want to like go find it.
You can look it up.
It's a mimic it's the blue-green that just copies itself every turn.
Oh, yeah. Progenitor Mimic.
Progenitor Mimic, that's the one. Yeah, so you get a Progenitor Mimic on the table, and you're like, what am I going to clone? Well, I'll do another one of these. So, or like they're people or something that does things like, I'll clone the person that destroys things on the way in, things like that. So, acidic slime, more. I think that the expense of the game is probably, if you were not allowed to make proxies, is probably kind of prohibitive for a lot of new people, I would say. Especially as things continue to be expensive in the world in general. I think that is one of, I have appreciated in this group that the consensus is that you are willing to play against the best that the mind has to offer. which is often limited by the theme, which is less efficient than just throwing the best card you can for the 5 colors. Rather than trying to fight against the budget. Because if you make up like the perfect deck and you can only afford 10 cards of it, and then you're just stuffers in for the rest, it's like, what's the point?
Well, there's another thing too. I think at least so I'm not into the like big commander decks because I just don't have you guys like encyclopedic knowledge.
Yeah,
it's like 30,000 cards. You're like, oh yeah, primordial ooze or whatever.
Yeah,
shoot. But, so I like limited where you do a draft.
Yeah, limited is a whole new thing.
And I feel like for me, I don't need to know everything. I just need to understand
the cards that
I'm looking at, and I can read them right here.
Yeah,
and I can play. So that's another way I think. New people can also get into it.
No, I remember when we first started, when I joined you guys in taking this seriously, they had you were trying to get to the cube a lot, and I had made my own decks, and so there was a lot of the drive was to make my own decks, make the theme, see if the theme worked. What can I like? What cards failed me? What cards were good that worked? Like, what cards failed me that I think have a better shot next time? You know,
it's like, the solution to this, is to make your own cube of your cards that you want in there.
Yeah. Maybe.
Come on. You got enough printed up?
And then
Josh guess like pointers, I'm sure.
And so, like at the time, Josh was also trying to get the cube going. I'm like, we're gonna just create random decks on the spot that'll be taken apart a few hours later. And I just like not much interest to me. It's like I have my own decks. I want to test my own decks. I want to see if my own decks work.
Right.
I want them to win for the first time. I want them to win for the 4th time. I like playing this. And then
tweaking it, making it better based on how it performs.
Yeah.
I get it.
And then as that happened, and we would go through, and I would see like, I've actually won with every color combination. Cool. And some decks more consistently, and some people will borrow my decks and be like, wow, this deck is nuts. And some people will borrow decks and be like, yeah, this could use some work.
There's also randomness too.
Yeah, there is. And then like, how do you fight randomness? And like, what's the best way? And then there's also like the upgrading for progress as more sets are released. Like my Jorah's gotten a lot meaner. She's they released Doctor Who, which has some time play, so she can speed things up even faster. And they also unbanned Worldfire, so she can cast Worldfire.
It sounds powerful. I don't know.
Let's say it was banned, and for some reason they decided to unban it.
Okay. Well, I think what I'm going to do now is start to kind of wrap things up a little bit.
Probably.
Oh, no, just kind of pushing in that direction. So what I'm thinking to finally maybe land on one topic is, do you think games in your life and other people's life, how have they shaped you? Do you think it's an important aspect for people? Or is it, the classic, if you play Nintendo, you're going to rot your brain?
Make you violent.
Thing. Yeah. That whole thing. So there's a debate.
That is an interesting thing. And this is where the Simplexity, I don't think I'll be able to bring myself to give a one way or another. I will say that I think that if I were to do everything over again as much as I do now, I would definitely tone back on certain games at certain times. And then I think that there were other times where people need to relax. There are some people who become billionaires and they probably don't play a whole lot of WoW. And maybe if I never did, I could be a billionaire.
Maybe. That's also a high probability or chance roll.
Elon Musk plays Diablo.
That's what I was gonna say.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
He plays he's got like a max level character, and he like broadcasts his like Lilith fights because he has like 100 level druid, and he's like, I'm gonna beat Lilith in the and whatever thing, and he's like sharing his like Paragon board.
He sounds like a whale.
Definitely.
But he doesn't just like play. He's like really into it.
He
So
can afford.
he really likes it.
Yeah, no, I think that I think, like many things, I think it's something that you need to be careful about. I think that there's a lot of ways to relax that if it's not done in moderation, it becomes unhealthy. And I believe that even if you are doing like puzzle games that make you think, or games that are nurturing some social aspects and people coordinating, coming together, or you have to do critical thinking and analyze and like learn patience and things. I think that you could take it too far. I would say that I definitely have at times.
I think we're all guilty of that.
Yeah,
at least at this table.
At this table.
It's the intensity of personality.
Yeah. But I think that I think there's a lot of merit to it as well, just as far as being able to relax and have fun and unwind. If you never de-stress, then your bad things happen.
Yeah.
And so, who is to say someone spending the same amount of time watching sports or just reading a book is any better off, right? So it's like there's still the same degree of productivity. So I mean, like, there are more productive hobbies. I've done my share of programming on the side and coming up with developing those skills, which can be marketable, but there's a lot of things that are just relaxing, and I think that is something to defend. There's industries that spend millions and millions of dollars trying to entertain people, and currently a lot of them are losing more millions because they're failing, which could be a bit of a digression. But I think that I would say be careful, and I would say know yourself, and I wouldn't just immediately dismiss it.
Yeah. So I mean, I do think it's entertaining. I think maybe earlier in an episode on the podcast, I think there's like actual benefits to playing games. It's not just to blow off steam.
Yeah.
Like in playing games and certain kinds of games, I think it trained me to think in a different way and maybe quickly assess, okay, these are the different parts and how do I get through this?
Yeah. And I mean, it also depends on which game you're playing, right? So if you're playing checkers forever, maybe you're with critical centers that are going to be less developed than if you're to do like chess. Or poker is a great one too for like social observations, and just like, how did you think that was a good idea? And like realizing like there are a lot of people out there that are like, it's just a terrible way to do it. Like, like that's bad. And then when you apply that to like society, you just sort of realize that there's a lot of people out there that just don't think super critically about everything. And I had a thought.
Yeah, no, we all do. It kind of slip away. Do you have any comment on the current topic? No. Okay. Well, I think that's a pretty good place to end it then.
Yeah.
Unless you have any other things you'd like to add?
I think that if we're going to do this again, I don't need to share everything I've ever thought.
Yeah, I'd love to have you back. It's been a lot of fun.
I hope so.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everyone. And as we say at the end,
Always be curious.
always be curious. You have to say
Or
it too.
else. Always be curious
Yes.
or else.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.